So guys, welcome to the stream. This is Dev Diary episode 20 for the 17th of November 2018. So it's been a while since we did a Dev Diary and there's been quite a few changes to the game. I have a build prepared, so I'm just going to navigate to that. I'll find the build and launch it for you guys. So, to find my build directory. It should be pre-alphas, and it's a shipping build. 4.4. So, if there's any errors here, you'll have to forgive me, but there shouldn't be too many. Just going to minimize some stuff here in case I miss anything in chat. Okay, so we'll launch this. This should launch full screen, never mind the fatal error thing. There is no fatal error. It just means one of the plugins I'm using I have to recompile. Okay, so here we are in the main menu. Nothing's really changed here from the last time you've seen it, but if I click on play demo, so with the Dublin Games Festival next weekend I'll be demoing the game there, so I re-hooked up the intro and stuff.
Eirik Mavoshta, the darkness grows. It has sensed your presence. It was no storm, but destiny that delivered you to these shores. Wake up, Niev. It's time to set things right again.
So here we are. I was looking up in the sky there because I had been moving the mouse around, so that's one thing on my checklist, to-do list, is to kind of fix that. But as you can see, we've streamed in, and unlike previous demos, our magic abilities are pretty much there from the start now. So let's have a quick look at what we kind of have up and running and working. We have our fast travel, which has been working for a while now. And you can see we can find a fast travel around the place. And I'll just fast travel back to the village. But we should also have our change time of day. So let's go for sunset. As you can see, there we are, sunset. So I'll do a big change in time of day. I'll go back to midday. So we should cycle all the way around. You see the moon and everything change. Boom, we're at midday. So down here in the water, I'll show you in the editor after a while, but just to give you an idea of what's going on here, we'll go into the water. And you'll see, as soon as I get outside my depth, we have a bar that comes up along the bottom, and that's my air supply. And once my air supply is completely gone, it should start eating into my health. Now this box's volume rather I've placed here isn't huge, so we'll just wait and see what happens. Should start to lose all that nice air supply, and it should start eating into our health. So there you can see we have an effect, and our health is being decremented. And we have our death screen. So I appear to have messed up there. I haven't shown my mouse cursor, but oh wait, no, I wasn't clicked on the window. That was the problem. So I can exit to main menu, or I can continue from checkpoint. So we'll continue from checkpoint. Now, all going well. We should just load in. There we go. Because we've already watched the intro, we should just load in. So, there's a few other things I'd like to show you, but for now, what we're going to do is we're going to quit out of the demo. And I'm going to go into the development mode. So, with that said, I'll get some of these blueprints up for you guys to see. So, death, that's the one. Okay, so we're going to take a quick look at the death volume. The drowning volume in this death drowning. So here it is, the blueprint, death drowning. It looks fairly complex, but there's not as much going on there as you might think. That's the widget for our actual air supply, and so what we're doing is on overlap we're checking. So we're checking to see if the player's head is underwater, because it obviously makes sense that you don't want the drowning and air supply to be decremented when it's only the player's foot that is in the water. So we want it only to be when it's the player's head. So if I open my character here, my character blueprint, and as you can see, it's quite dense. There's a lot going on in here, and there's a lot more to be done. But what we're interested in here is to actually go to the viewport. And if I go over here, you notice that one of the children of the mesh is a volume called Drowning Head. So if I press F on that, you can see that it's attached to the head bone of the skeleton. I'm not too worried about its orientation and position. It only roughly has to be in the right place. So if we go back over to our volume, which you can see here, I'll try and select it in the viewport. It's a bit hard sometimes to select these volumes, but you can see it there. That's our little volume. I'll load up that's the persistent level, but I'll load up the level, the little village, so you can kind of get a better idea of where exactly in the world this this volume is in comparison to our playthrough. So I put it close to the Currach, the little boat that's upside down here for now. So what we're basically doing is, if we go back over to our drowning blueprint. So on component begin overlap, we are checking, we're casting to the first person character as player pawn. We're setting the target in menus. So if we're not in a menu, we can go ahead and treat this as just a regular drowning volume and proceed on down through the graph. So we create the widget. Now there's a reason I create the widget first, and I actually add it to the viewport later, because we have this condition here, cast to first person character, and we're checking, is in the array of overlapping components, is one of the components the drowning head. So only if this box is within our volume are we actually going to trigger the drowning. So then we add the progress bar that you've seen in this little guy here to the viewport, and we move on down the line. We clear and invalidate some timers there that I'll come back to. Again, we do another cast, but this time we're getting the float value, air supply, current from the player, and if the air supply is less than or equal to 0, we start decrementing their health. If it isn't less than or equal to 0, we start decrementing their air supply. So decrement air supply, we're clearing and validating other timers that I'll explain later on. We're again casting into the first person character, we're getting the current air supply, and we're decreasing it by the air decrement rate. So the air decrement rate is 40. So over every second in this timer, we're decrementing 4 from the player's air supply, which is 100. Then we're doing a check. So if air supply after that is less than or equal to 0, we play a sound effect. So that's when our kind of pain sound effect from our female character. And then we're casting again, this time to the first person character again, but this time we're getting current health, and we're using the health decrement rate float to subtract from that. So it's rather punishing. It's 6 units every second out of a possible 100. And what we're also doing then is there's an animation, you may have seen it, that kind of red pane effect that comes up on the screen. We're playing that animation. So our drowning volume keeps looping through these until our player dies. And if our player dies, we remove the drowning widget, air supply widget from the screen, and we create our death widget. And in the death widget, it just adds to viewport. You've seen it there. Death is not the end, and we can restart from our last checkpoint, or we can quit out to main menu. So with that said, on end overlap, we're basically doing the invert of that. We're going up here. So once we're not overlapping the volume, we clear our timers here. Our event set timer by events. We clear and invalidate those timers, and we go into another timed event here, which is incrementing our air supply. Note that we increment our air supply, but not our health. So, and again, once our air supply is greater than or equal to 100, I have some print text here just at development time, just to show that our air supply has replenished. We remove the same widget then from parent. So once you come out of the water, you'll see the air supply come back up, and then once it has come back up, we've removed the widget, we clear and invalidate the timer for the actual regeneration of our air supply, and then in case we have a value for air supply current that isn't 100, it might be slightly more than 100 because of the way we're doing things, we set the air supply to 100. So we may be bringing it down a notch. So with that said, that's how our air supply blueprint works, just simply through the use of this drowning head volume that interacts in the viewport with this purple volume you see right here. So that's the main idea behind how that works. So without launching, we're just going to play an editor. It might take a couple of seconds just to come up, as it just caches some of the stuff for me. So here we are, we're in the level. I'll just full screen that, make it a little easier for you guys.
Yeah.
Now you can see I'm firing underwater and stuff. I still have to fix some of these things. Oh, I think I actually came out of the volume. Okay, note to self, don't fire in the volume because I may have broken it just there. Okay. So you can see our air supply going down. As soon as our head goes underwater, and we should start getting the pain. You can see that little pain animation playing. So if I come out of the water now, you can see it stops. So as you can see, there's still a lot of work to be done with it, but the basic idea is there. Our health is regenerating, or rather our air supply is regenerating. So you may notice there that down the left hand of the screen, it just started saying fog. So we know that the next weather condition that's coming is fog. So you can kind of see it growing there. The fog is getting more and more dense. Again, these atmospheric or environmental kind of weather system changes only come they come every 30 to 60 seconds at design time. But if the game is packaged for shipping, I have timing between every 5 to 8 minutes the weather changes. It cycles through an inclusive random integer value of a range of 1 to 4, 1 being fair, 2 being rainy, 3 is a storm, and 4 is just fog, like this. We have a way to control that as well, so I have a variable, a boolean, that's part of that function that is called mission control. So if I want to take over from the dynamic weather and have specific weather for scripted events and certain things, I can just go in there and take control of the weather and set it to anything I want, really. Again, our day length is 90 minutes, so it's nice to have at least, 3 or 4 weather changes throughout the course of the day. Since our game is set in Ireland, a lot of you guys, if you've ever been to Ireland, you'll know that it's quite common to get very variable weather with plenty of rain here in Ireland. So that's some of the reasons I have the weather set the way it is. So being an inclusive variable means basically that you can hear now that the weather's switching to fair. But being an inclusive variable means that if the current weather is set to fair, you can see the fog receding. But if the current weather is set to fair, then there is a 1 in 4 chance that the weather could again be fair in the next time we do our random int. You can see that we also have what I've called named audio, what did I call it? An ambient audio jukebox, which basically means I have a blueprint that reads what weather conditions are and plays different ambient environment audio for each different weather condition. So hopefully we get another weather change shortly. I do still have my debug menu here where I can print off stats and stuff, but I won't use it right now, but it's there if I need it. So we've gone to storm, so you can hear the audio effects have changed. At the moment we have our particle system kicking in. Unfortunately, I don't have culling. By that I mean if you go inside here into the house, you'll notice that it's raining indoors. I have a fix for that I want to implement sooner rather than later. It took me a while to figure out how I do that, and I do have it working in a test project, but I've yet to implement it here, where basically I attach a camera to the player and generate a height map, a render target, and basically anything that I use that then to basically get rid of rain. The reason I do it that way and not with particle collisions is that's it's too heavy. It's too processor heavy to calculate every particle effect and every collision. It's just it's not feasible. So along with our little particles here, I also am in the process of creating actual sheets of rain. So you'll have the particle systems in around the player, but let's say 500 units I'll fire out to about where I'm talking about. So that stone up ahead that our projectile just hit there, so we'll have sheets of rain that just kind of pass over to kind of deepen the effect of the rain. And depending on whether it's stormy or rainy, I can increase their velocity to kind of give the effect of weather. So that's our weather system. So let's have a quick look at some of the weather stuff. Again, I'm just going to bring up my chat and my OBS and stuff in case I miss out on anything. Okay, guys. So if I go into my content, my personal content, audio, you may see this one, ambient jukebox. So this was the blueprint I was talking about that controls the audio. So it's basically like a fall or fail tree. Is what I've come up with it for. So it has a public variable here, int ambient local. So there is another int for the actual weather, but this one is kind of a, a, a I wouldn't say an instance or a copy of that variable. It's its own variable that basically tracks that. So we cast from cgd game instance where our int ambient local is stored, and we use that to drive our jukebox in a very similar way that we use to drive our weather system itself. So we have a delta timer here that we use just to fade in and out our music, and if int ambient local is equal to 1, we do this. And again, as I said before, it's kind of like a fail tree. So if that fails, then it must be 2, and if that fails, it must be 3, and if that fails, it must be 4. So we have fog, storm, rain, and fair. And obviously, you know, there's only 4 ints, so it's gonna catch on one of these guys. So that's basically how our jukebox works. So it's given out to me. I better check out that file, and I'm just gonna close that for now. Music jukebox. The idea with the music jukebox was to do the same thing. Basically, so it's blank at the moment, but my idea would be that I would have different variables. So I would have player state. So what I mean by player state would be that, let's say we have let's say we're in combat or we're questing. I can have like a player state, so I can track how many times you've cast magic in the last minute, how many times you've done certain things, how many times you've used like your time peaking ability. By that I mean I'll show you the time peaking ability. So if you're using the visioning ability and you're actually engaging with stuff, I can change what background music is playing to suit the kind of mood of what the player's doing at that time. So if they're engaged in combat, it'll be one kind of music. If they're questing and kind of exploring and visioning it around, it'll play music that would suit that. Other things too that it could track is the average speed of the player. So if you're not engaged in combat but you've been running around a lot, then you'd have a more upbeat track. Whereas if your player movement has been quite slow and you've been visioning a lot, it would be more kind of a mysterious kind of track to kind of give the player some feedback, audio feedback as to what kind of actions and gameplay style that they're currently working with. So with that said, there are a lot of the changes. In my previous video you would have seen some of the stuff I had done prior to getting ready for Dublin Comic Con. So if I maybe I'll go into the level blueprint. So I'm just going to make the persistent level my current level. So make current, and I am going to launch open the level blueprint. So inside the level blueprint, you can see that there is a lot of stuff that depends on whether we're going for a packaged build, a shipping build, and things like that. So in this area here, is packaged for distribution. If it is, then we package a lot of the stuff that's to do with the intro, and we cast forward back between the game instance at runtime to kind of control a lot of those things. Again, in the character blueprint, the first-person character blueprint, which is a bit silly calling it first-person character because it has third-person in there. You'll notice that there's a lot of this pink stuff. Now, the pink stuff is, well, that shouldn't really be pink because pink is a colour for something else. So we'll make it like a an ugly orangey, greeny, slimy, yucky color. There we go. Kind of running out of colors to designate things in here, but it's important to stick with the kind of color and naming conventions. Yeah, so set last player location. So this was one thing that I was using to basically control where the player spawns in the world, so that if it's a case that you quit out of the menu and restart, that you don't spawn at the last teleported location. Although I'm going to be updating that and having it eventually, so that as part of both the save file, so that we're taking stuff from the main game instance and we're placing that into our save file. That's something that I'll be working on immediately after Dublin Games Festival. But for now, I have a lot of this stuff in pink that's just kind of placeholder for now. Whereas this begin play event, which feeds into a sequence, will be getting slightly more complex as I go along. And there's plenty of other parts and areas where I have this pink set up to let me know that I need to do a bit of work on that. So with that said, what I'm hoping to get done is to finalize some of this drowning volume, which I will just increase in scale to cover the entire island, the entire kind of swimmable area. Once that's done, I have some audio fixes to do with it, because it's not I'm not resetting the audio sometimes, so I've got to look into that and get the audio working pretty good for that again, and some of the audio mixing and things like that, which is simple enough. It'd only take like half an hour to fix that. But some of the bigger things on the cards is to kind of as I said earlier, is to have the occlusion for the particle systems based on the height map rather than on collisions, because it's cheaper. It'll probably cost me, not even 0.1 of a frame per second if I do it by means of a render to target, whereas if I do it with collisions, it would be, it's going to cost you serious CPU time. With that said, this drowning volume, with some alterations, I can use that for like a burning volume or for a freezing volume or any other kind of damage based volume that you can think of. I'd also like to get player character animations hooked up so that you actually see the player kind of either drown or bowl over. I doubt between now and next weekend, that's when Dublin Games Festival is on, that I'll actually have a swimming animation in. But again, that was kind of why I put the player character volume, this head drowning volume on the character, because I wanted to be able to have a system where it was only when the face of the character was in the water that you would have that kind of drowning kick in. So in the future, that'll enable me to have a system where you can actually dive down and swim underwater, or you can just swim along the top. With that said, one of the big feedbacks I'm hoping to get from Dublin Games Festival this weekend is basically the setup I'm using at the moment. So by that I mean the player character setup. So we have the first person and third person options, which I like, but tend to kind of complicate things. It means that sometimes you've got to do things twice rather than once. So what I hope to do is come up with a swimming solution and other kind of character movement and combat solutions that work well with both setups, with both the first person mode and the third person mode. Once that's done, we're nearly complete as regards kind of player controller and damage. A lot of the, as I showed you before, a lot of the mechanics behind this drowning volume even can be used when it comes to the player taking damage from NPCs. So hopefully, shortly after Dublin Games Festival, I'll be able to come along and take a lot of this stuff and expand on it, and have a player damage component that integrates these ideas into one single blueprint that we can attach to this character or any other character, so that the volumes and let's say NPCs that might have similar attack abilities kind of work in tandem, work in the same way. So with that said, with a week to go, I kind of have to prioritize on what I'm going to be doing. I have to really only bite off as much as I can chew. So to get the NPCs, the skeletons you would have seen in previous videos, I'm going to reuse those. I might do a small bit of work on their AI, but you can see these little spheres here that are part of this blueprint here. That's where they spawn in. So I'm going to have a little kind of mess around with that. Have it so that when you start the game, your magic abilities are only unlocked once you visit the stone. I'll do a few kind of quality of life things like that. I can't remember, have I got my walls out here? I'll just yeah, no, I don't have those, but I can put them back up. They're kind of like these volumes that are walls rather, that only appear once you get to the edge of the kind of demo area of the map. Even though I'm allowing players to fast travel around to kind of show them that fast travel is included, and there is kind of things like that built into the game, I still want to kind of tell the player somehow visually that, well guys, this is only a demo, so I've put up these kind of walls just to give the player a kind of communicate with the player that it is just still a demo and that there's a lot to be done. So speaking a bit more long term about the project, after these kind of immediate quality of life things with the player character, I think it's kind of we're moving into a realm where it's time to move on to quest and mission design. So I'll be coming up with systems and ways to do that, kind of templates that I can use, be it sub-levels that contain the missions with the kind of that can kind of be streamed in, depending on we can set up a variable for each mission. There might be main missions and side quests, and we can turn side quests on and off as and when players complete different missions, and basically control our level stream in that way. That's one way I'm going to look into it. The actual UI and quest design for that, I want to come up with kind of sit down and think out like the 3 to 4 major kinds of missions there's going to be, and kind of use them as templates then when it comes to working with dialogue and kind of the storyline, working with the writer to kind of come up with good ideas for how we can use these quest or mission design tools to kind of work with the narrative structure of the game. So with that said, that's been Dev Diary episode 20. It's been a while since we've done one of these, but I'm hoping to do one again soon. There's going to be some content coming in December, so a lot more assets going in as we build out of the main village. Once Dublin Games Festival is over, we are going to start then moving away from this kind of vertical slice of the game into something that looks like a more finished game. So thanks for tuning in, guys. That was Dev Diary episode 20 for the 17th of November 2019, and hopefully when I chat to you all again in the near future, we're going to have some hopefully some videos and pics from Dublin Game Fest, and some I might be able to share some awesome new content, some audio, some models, some animations and characters that'll be coming up very shortly. Cheers, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
This